So the next thing that we're going to address are intra-lease notices. Intra-lease notices, and those are notices to your resident, and sometimes we'll talk about that. It's actually a notice to you as the landlord or to our property management company, okay? So with those intra-lease notices, most people are familiar with the 3-day notice, okay? And that's for the non-payment of rent. But there's actually different types of notices that can be completed at the property or during that lease term. So we've kind of broken that down into 2 different categories to better explain it to you. So the first category, that'll be general updates. Okay, so when it comes to general updates at the property, that may be, the HOA is painting the outside of the building on this day, or, they're repairing the stairs at your unit on this day, or whatever the pest control is going to be by this day and this time. Those are just general updates, meaning the resident hasn't done anything wrong, but they do require the proper notice because something is being completed to the property that they are leasing. Okay, the second category is going to be those lease violations, okay? And that's the category that non-payment of rent falls into, the lease violations category, but that's the one that people are most familiar with. However, anything that's outlined in that lease agreement, if it's not being properly fulfilled by the resident, may require a notice to go out to the resident. And a lot of times what we use is the 7-day notice to cure. Now, depending on the severity of the violation, you may give them an opportunity to cure and you may not. One of the things that we always lean toward is giving them an opportunity to cure. Going back to what we said previously, is a lot of times there's no such thing as a bad resident, someone who just sets in their mind to be a horrible resident. Usually they just don't know what those proper guidelines are and how to be a great resident. So these notices give us an opportunity to get something that may be off track to get it back on track, right? So when it comes for these lease violations, it may be something like they're not keeping up with the lawn maintenance, and in the lease agreement it was their responsibility as a resident to do so. It may be something where they have unauthorized pets, or they have unauthorized residents at the property, so that means they didn't go through, that particular adult in the property that's living there didn't go through the application and leases process. Okay, it could be that sort of thing. So with those lease violations, again, generally we try to provide them with a 7-day notice to cure. Another common one are HOA, homeowner associations violations. Okay, and in that case, a lot of times the HOA have been by the property. They may see a grill out on the patio that's not supposed to be there, by the HOA standards, or a towel or something hanging over the balcony that's not supposed to be there. The trash cans are out for too long. So in those sort of situations, anytime that it comes to a lease violation or an update, we actually will go out, we'll post a notice, we'll make sure that the resident is well aware of what's going on, what the issue seems to be. Okay, we'll give them the time frame that they need to correct that, and then we actually go back out to the property, and if it's possible to take photo documentation, which it generally is, we actually take photo documentation that it's been rectified. Now that is also very important, especially when it comes to those HOA violations, because with those, they like to know that it's been taken care of, okay? So we can provide them with proof that we have done our part to make sure it's been taken care of. The other thing that it does in that situation, especially when we get photo documentation that it's been taken care of, is now if that same problem occurs again, now we can have a different conversation with the resident, okay? So it's not where you don't want to be a bad resident, you just don't know. It's a matter of and now this is something that you're doing intentionally. Okay, and that is a different conversation. But once we have that photo documentation, that means not only that they know the problem, they actually took the proper steps to correct it. So then if it comes up again, we can take some different action and a different approach to it. So that's kind of how we handle it, and it really does work out well. It allows us again to keep the lines of communication open with the resident in order to teach them how to be a great resident for that particular property. Now, it is very important when it comes to posting notices and when it comes to this part of the lease management, it is very important to know that every single thing that comes up may be a legal obligation for either the resident or for the landlord. Okay, so it's very important that they're handled properly. Another thing that happens is if the proper notice isn't posted, if it's not posted within a certain time frame, if it's not filled out correctly, those sort of things, then it actually could become null and void, and you actually have to redo it in order to properly go through the process and in order to start the next steps. So it's always very important to get those correct. That's information we're constantly going over with our attorneys and things in that regard in our legal team to ensure that we're doing it in the proper manner for you, okay? We're completing the proper notices based on the actual event that's occurring, okay? But it is very important to know that may be a legal obligation. So one of the things that I wanted to mention, that I mentioned before, was that it may actually be the landlord receiving a notice. And that's very important to know and understand, okay? So generally that comes up for maintenance items. Okay, maintenance around the items. So items that you are required to fix by law and under the landlord-tenant law. Okay, and you'll see that in the agreement, different items that you are required to fix by law. And we work with you to make sure that's done as quickly as possible. Now, if you're fighting with us on those type of items, which I have not had a landlord do thus far, but if you're fighting with us on those type of items, it's very important for you to know and understand that the resident also has certain rights, and that if certain maintenance items aren't completed, they can actually serve you with a notice, with a 7-day notice or whatever is appropriate, in order to have that fixed, or they can begin to legally withhold rent. Okay, and those things are very important to know and understand. So if in any event, which we've never had it happen, but we are aware of, but in the event that something like that happens, then we help you manage that, help you understand what that notice means and what your next steps need to be and how quickly you need to get there, okay? So again, we haven't had that happen. We have excellent landlords. Again, it comes back to that consultation that we have and really understanding each other's goals. But in the event that something like that does happen, or you receive a notice, sometimes it could be, a faulty notice where they feel like they can do it and they really can't. Those are things that we kind of guide you through and walk you through throughout the process. So this seems like a smaller part of it, but it is not. It is definitely a legal obligation that's there, and one of the major parts in the lease management part of your property. See you soon.